Okay, so I was just saying that, again, this is Thursday, so you guys have the weekend then to work. As you have time. My expectations is on Tuesday when we meet again, we can take a look at where everybody's at in Revit, with modeling, remodeling, or converting the Rhino model into a Revit model, um, that of your favorite, the thing that you think is most productive or fruitful, study model that you developed and then made Axon drawings of. I also remind everybody that there's a place in Canvas to submit those if you haven't already. Melanie and David have. Sully, you submitted them via email. Anna, welcome. We were just getting started. And then just a reminder to upload your Axons to, okay, every time I start. We'll just wait for Kayla. Hi, Kayla. Good morning. All right, we're all here. And can you all hear me? All right.
Yes.
Okay, so a couple of things. One, it's Thursday. So that means it's due date for wherever you're at on your Axons, your Axon drawings. So please submit those as a PDF or multiple PDFs if you need to on Canvas. It might say that you're late now since it's past 10 a.m. I don't really care about that. I want to get them and want to be able to look at them over the weekend. And um, the other thing is I want you to be able to sort of put them behind you and pick the one that you think is going to be the most productive and start to bring that into Revit. And that's what we'll be doing the majority of today is more Revit demonstrations. I expect you over the weekend, for those who have been here since day one, Kayla, you might have some different instructions, of course, because you're just joining us, to begin to work out the model in Revit, so that we can just take a look at what you have on Tuesday. Um, um, but I expect to see floors and walls. We'll talk more about floors and walls, roofs and windows and some other types of wall types, etc. Right? So I found that things work really well, oftentimes in the recordings, but then lo and behold, once it's time to actually sit down and do it yourself, sometimes you don't quite remember some little detail or piece of minutia that we didn't really cover or didn't cover very thoroughly. So again, I want you that comes with practice. I want you to try your best to try to model the Rhino model the Rhino Axon model that you've done, one of the planar compositions that you've done, between now and Tuesday. Realizing though that I'm not really going to collect any Revit models from you yet, and that but you will be expected to sort of share your screen and just share what you have if it's possible, or share images of screenshots maybe if you can't share your screen. Okay. All right. Is that clear to everybody? All right. Like I said, I'm already recording, so this is on the recording for today. So if you need to refer back, you have a quick question, you can always listen to this and then you can send me an email if the question is still out there. Okay. Um, right. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen if there's nothing else. But again, reminder, sometime before the weekend starts, sometime today, submit your axons if you haven't yet. Um, And Kayla, we can maybe talk a little more in detail at the end of today's classes, just to sort of see where you're at and see what we need to do to get you completely caught up. Okay. All right. So, but again, as a friendly reminder, yeah, good. Okay. So as a friendly reminder, all these things are recorded, so they're there to refer back to if you need to, once you actually have the time to sort of breathe and look and try to absorb some of the information. And then, of course, part of what we do after absorbing it is we try to apply it to try to remember it, okay, and use it. So let's see, share screen. All right, I'm going to share my desktop because it's not clear to me sometimes. Window sizes are kind of odd with the parallels stuff. All right, can you guys see my screen and you see I have Revit up? Yeah, great. All right. It looks like by default, it looks like the last view window I was looking at, the Rhino, or sorry, the Revit model in was cover sheet view. That's the three-dimensional view or sort of a perspective. Um, and of course, let me just try to move this out of the way. See if I can move it towards the bottom. There we go. All right. You can see that there's a sort of a block here with a compass, and you can begin to sort of toggle back and forth between views. Like I can say top view, let's go to a corner view. Now I'm in perspective, looking at it from the left and front. I could, of course, just sort of drag these compass around. Of course, if I hold down the Shift key and use the right mouse button, I can sort of spin the view or dolly or tumble. If I'm not, I think it rotates, but it rotates around some other point in space. I'm not sure why. And then you want to be able to have a mouse that has a scroll wheel. Any kind of CAD programs, really, a lot of the programs you're going to use for design and graphics and post-production, you'll want to use a mouse. You want to have a mouse for. They're very frustrating without a mouse. A lot of them are designed to have left and right mouse clicks, scrolling to sort of zoom in and out, even a third click in some cases. So just keep that in mind, right? That might be another supply to get next time you're shopping or you're on Amazon or something. All right. Let's talk about the views really quickly. It's worth, I think, sort of talking about here. Again, if I go to 3D views down here, you can see that the only 3D view I have starting off with is cover sheet view. But up here, there's a view tab. Okay. And so I can make more views, right? And they'll populate the 3D views. If I go to the view tab and then go to 3D view, I can say default 3D view. Let's see here. All right. That looks like it's giving me an axon, like all of the lines are sort of parallel, which is kind of interesting. There's a few other quick things. I mean, there is a render button here. There's a cloud render button. You can also, if you have Twin Motion Unreal Engine, you can toggle back and forth and sort of put the model in and start to look at it in real time with some rendering. Let's see here, 3D view. I have to remind myself a little bit about this. Oh, okay, so we can actually go with camera, create the 3D view from the perspective of camera placed in the view. All right, so here I can sort of give it a camera and then show where the camera's looking. And now I have a window. You can see now I have yet another 3D view, right? Of course, I can right click on this, I think, and say rename. There we go. So I can call this perspective 01. A couple of things I might do here is start to look at the properties of this view, right? The camera and where it's pointed. But really quickly, here's the other 3D view I made. I'll just rename that axon so I can keep these things straight. That's a paralines drawing or an axonometric, right? And again, just as a quick reminder, I mean, hopefully you sort of notice this when I see an axon, if this is the sort of edge of my paper, right? These are the edges of my paper. Anything sort of moving off in depth and space along the X or Y axes are going to be, in this case, 30 degrees horizontal. And they're going to remain parallel and measured. There's no foreshortening. There's no depth shrinking or converging to a vanishing point, right? With perspective, of course, we start with vanishing points. It's very hard to draw with a mouse, surprisingly, in Zoom to freehand this, right? But then suddenly we see that these things aren't parallel. These edges actually converge to our vanishing points. And things that are further away look smaller, things that are closer look bigger, right? Just like our eyeballs, right? So that's the difference between perspective versus axon. Okay. Just as a quick reminder, I think we talked about that a little before, but it never hurts to sort of go over it again and again and again. Sort of beat it into our head, so to say. All right, so let's see. I'm going to go back to perspective. Again, you can go back to the properties and start to change a few things here. And my hope is that, right? So it says eye elevation 5'6", so it's assuming, let's say, the average human height is 5.5 feet. The target elevation is also pointed sort of horizontally at 5'6". Perspective 1 is what it's called. Let's see what other kinds of things we have here. We have clip offset, so we can actually clip hither yon. In other words, we could tell how far we can see or don't see. Detail level, parts of visibility, show original. Let's see here. Now what's interesting is you'll notice that there's sun path, and then I might actually have to move my zoom interface around a bit. And then down here at the bottom, there are some other, just like with Rhino, there's a set of toggles you can go on and off with. So right here, you can say detail level. That just is a sort of how much detail your screen is going to display at a certain view and a certain zoom level, based on the performance of your computer and how responsive you want it to be. Visual style right now, we have it set to hidden line. We can actually change that. We could change it to shaded or textures or realistic. We can turn the sun and the sun path on and off, right, etc. So let me just go to this overall cover sheet view. Let's see what happens when we start to look at these, right? So I think right now we already have consistent colors. I could change that to shaded or to textures. Consistent colors look good for right now. I'll just do that. And I can actually turn the sun on. So let's turn the sun path on. Use the specified project location, date, and time, or continue with the current settings. All right. So I'm just going to go with time and day and location for right now. I'm not sure where it's getting that information at. And now I can do things like toggle the sun on and off and have it project shadows at a particular time of day, particular time of year. Let's see if I can. Solar study, sun settings. Let's bring up the sun settings. Right now it's set for Boston, Massachusetts at 4 p.m. on April 12th. That's oddly specific in the most incorrect way possible. So anyway, solar study still, you can do single day, multi-day lighting. We're really close to the summer solstice, right? Have we talked a little bit about solar geometry? Let's talk a little bit about that. You know, I've always found that the easiest way to do that is to show the sun path. And we can see how the shadows work. And then suddenly you go, oh yeah, that's pretty easy. We already knew that, but it's worth maybe going over really quickly. Location. I'm just going to set our location to Las Vegas. Yeah, Las Vegas, Nevada, not Las Vegas, New Mexico, wherever the hell that is. All right, weather station. Okay, so it's going to be looking at the relevant weather station data to get weather data. Excellent. All right. And we can go with, we're at, what's today? June 20th. Is today sometimes it falls on the 20th. Typically it falls on the 21st, just for all practical purposes. Let's set it for June 21st, tomorrow. Let's say tomorrow is the first day of summer, or the longest day of the year, summer solstice. And then let's go for close to solar noon here. Well, I don't know if that's solar noon or if that's our time zone noon. Looks like it's time zone noon. And what you'll find is that during the longest day of the year, let's see what's happening here. Looks like the sun is outside of the box I have here. But I'm not sure if you can see it. It's really hard to see the yellow against the white. But do you see this path? I have it sort of highlighted, and it moves up in this direction. Then it cuts off right here, annoyingly. And then it starts right back over here. Right, so that's the sun path throughout the day. Here's where it rises, northeast. It gets quite high in the sky, so the shadows are almost negligible, except unless you're right up against a wall on the north side. And then it comes right back down to the northwest. All right. So again, let me just annotate this further here. I'll use red. Right, so that's the sun path. This is solar noon. This is where it's rising. This is where it's setting. And then in a more granular sense, you could probably see by hour where it's located in the sky throughout the day. What we do is we look at this direction, then we basically, for all practical purposes, cast parallel shadows. The sun is so large and so far away from us that even though it's spherical, we assume parallel rays, depending on where it's at in the sky, right? So all of these things are casting shadows around where we would think, right? Um, all right, so that would be as opposed to, let's see here. Let's go back to the sun settings and let's change them. So instead of being 12 p.m., let's go with um, let's say 9 a.m. and hit apply. Right, now you can see the sun's over here in the sky. You can see that the shadows are projected, you know, towards the north and the west rather than just to the north. All right. Really quickly, let's just look at yearly sort of events. Let's go back to noon. And let's change the date to one of the equinoxes, right? Where the sun sort of rises due east and sets due west. Um, Sort of the middle ground between the two extremes, the summer and the winter. So those happen in March 21st and September 21st, right? Typically. All right. You can see that again, the sun rises due east, sets due west, sort of 12 hours of sunlight and 12 hours of night, right? Of day and night. And then of course, let me just draw that really quickly so that we keep that in mind. Let's see here. Not sure what's going on here. Let me just. The Revit has decided to put a box right in the way. Okay, there we are. My bad. Right, and so the sun might be here at noon, and the sun doesn't have as many hours in the sky. Uh, let's see. So let's just now move to winter. Hopefully this isn't too god awfully boring, but let's turn the date back to December 21st. We've been working in 2022. That's weird. All right, well, whatever. Right. You can see again in wintertime, the shadows are much longer. The sun is lower in the sky. It sets, or sorry, it rises in the southeast, sets in the southwest. Really hard to draw. I mean, you. Let me just undo that. That's a terrible parabola. All right. Okay, so that's what the sunlight looks like when you're looking at sun positions throughout the day. Um, oops, I just moved this. That was dumb. But you get a sense now of why these things look the way they do. And this is something that we'll be very cognizant of, right, as we continue to look at the sun and react to it in our program. All right. So what's nice about this is we don't necessarily have to think this abstractly. What we can do is we can turn on shadows and lights and sun, and then we can get inside and start to see where things are actually shining, where we have shadows, etc. Right? So if we want to align something, let's say a piece of the architecture with casting shadows and light rays through a space, let's say to celebrate the summer solstice, you can turn it on, you can turn it to the right date, turn it to the right time, let's say solar noon on the solstice, and then look and see and start to move things around so you get those alignments just like you want them, right? So that's what's I think very helpful here. You don't have to try to find the place of the sun and then start to project things down. The digital model will do that for you, of course. All right, so yeah, here you can see the winter sun. It's quite low in the sky. All right. Um, one other thing, I'm not sure. I might regret doing this, but putting the render button on, maybe render no, I'll just say render. Let's see what happens when I just render this really quickly. Sky, a few clouds. I mean, I'm not expecting much with just Revit right out of the box when it comes to rendering. Same thing with Rhino. You know, these are much better modeling tools, but you can see that you can actually render things with certain settings. What I found is that, you know, having a third-party render engine is actually much more productive for both Revit and Rhino. See if I can close that and just turn it off. Right. Just as a quick reminder, we'll get there eventually. We're not quite there yet. I must have closed it, but I'm gonna sort of play around with Lumion. That seems to be this one that's sort of free for everybody to sort of use and install. And it's you can get it for Revit, you can get it for Rhino, you can get it for SketchUp and some of those other modelers if you want. So I found that it's pretty handy to have. If you prefer something different like Inkscape or V-Ray, feel free to use that instead and just share how you use it, okay? So anyway, here we are. All right, I'm going to turn the sun path off. That just seems kind of dumb, but I'm going to leave the sun and shadows on. Why not? And so let's see here. Where were we? Ah, yes, we are modeling things. We can model and plan and section elevation. We can model here in 3 dimensions. But the first thing that we did, again, just as a quick reminder, and you'll see it here, is we established a grid both in plan and then also in the Z direction, right, in elevation section. So we established levels and section. We established a grid in X, Y. And again, those grids are there just to help you out. Now, a couple of things here, right? Here's our viewer down here, project browser. And I can toggle back and forth between different views, right? This is how I go back and forth between different viewports. So there's floor plan level 1, architectural floor plan level 1, 2, right? And each time it's cutting wherever that level is set in elevation, it moves up 4 feet and then cuts just like a section, but in plan orientation, right? So let's see what we have here, right? We have our grid. A couple of things. One is for some reason I had 44 feet stuck in my head the other day. And so I made these bays 22 feet when in fact it's 48 feet. So I'm just going to go ahead and change that. And if you remember, right, when we start to click on these things, sometimes it remembers the spacing, right? And you see how it's dimensioned it for us? And so now I can just go to the dimensions and if I just want to change something, right, I can just do it right here. So let's just make that 24. Let's make this one 24. Let's see what happens when I do that. Okay, now here's something that's interesting. When I do that, for whatever reason, it's not letting this thing expand outwards, right? And that's because you see this lock and you see this overall dimension. I need to unlock that. And now I can expand out. So let's see what happens when I now unlock that. Right, so you can see that there's levels of control that you can have here. And, oh, come on, what are you doing? Just move this. Oh, sorry, this is locked. Yeah, okay. 24, and I'll make this 24 as well. Oh, I see. That's really annoying. All right, sorry, I'm just going to do 24. Maybe I have to drag this one an extra foot, which I can do, and it should snap in useful increments to let me do that and eyeball it. Okay, there we are. That's annoying. I'm not sure why it does that, but whatever. All right, so now I've updated these things. And depending on how you draw these things, like if I draw this wall, I could always try to make the relationship with this wall always fall along this center line. The wall center line always fall along this grid line, right? Or I could have some sort of other relationship with it. And then if I move the center lines, the grid lines around, then the walls and things like that will update with it, right? So I think that's important to keep in mind is that as you go, sometimes you're putting in these relationships, and it's a matter of keeping track of them. And oftentimes you have to sort of, if something's not working the way you want it to, you'll have to select it and dial in, zoom in a bit to sort of see, well, what constraints do I have set up and what do I need to release? in order to make this thing work. All right. So if we go back to our three-dimensional view, you can see that I actually have two walls, like making a sort of L shape. This one starts at level 2 and moves up to level 3. This one starts at level 1 and moves up to level 3. And so I was just playing around, sort of showing you how to make walls and floors. All right, so let's just go back to level 1. I can do that. Here's a floor, right? I'm going to go ahead and delete that since it doesn't actually extend as far as I want it to. And so again, as a reminder, again, it doesn't necessarily flow right off the bat, but as soon as you can sort of get in the habit of really looking at these tabs, and then oftentimes when you're in the middle of a tool, you'll have like a confirm or delete, making sure that you're sort of confirming things and finishing things off. Just wait, you'll see what I mean. So let's just make a floor, right? You can see that we have walls, doors, windows, other sorts of components. We have columns, and those are important, and ceilings and floors. Other kinds of wall types like curtain wall systems and storefronts and things like that. Railings, ramps, and stairs, etc. So let's just make a floor. Let's make an architectural floor. All right. And basically what it's saying is let's make it. When you're done, hit this check mark. If you want to start over or cancel, you can hit the X, the red X. But what we're doing, it's asking us to sketch lines to create the boundary for a floor, so the shape. So which is what you would expect, right? Boundary line. Let's see here. And I'm just going to snap to the walls and the grids that we already have and hit OK. There we go. Now you can see that it's highlighted blue at the moment because I selected it, but there it is. All right. Yeah. Okay. Okay, can you see it now? All right. Another thing to sort of keep in mind, right, is that we're drawing this on level 1. So it's going to be on level 1. And then again, you can sort of see, maybe, where is it? There we go. L1, let's see here, sorry. It's just giving me the architectural plan properties when I actually have this thing selected. I'm not sure why it's doing that. Okay, yeah, all right. So let's go to this and okay, sorry, I don't know why it wasn't selecting the floor slab and then showing me its properties, right? So when we select stuff that we've made, we can go see its properties. This was just a generic 12-inch deep floor slab. We can keep it that way, or we can go with something more specific or stay generic. I'm just going to leave it there for right now. And again, we can say it starts at level 1. Let's take a look at where this actually falls. Let's look at one of the elevations or sections. Let's look at the section, see if we can see this thing, right? So you can see indeed that it starts at level 1, right? That's the sort of finish of the slab, the finish of the floor that we made is at level 1. And then it goes down whatever that 12 inches or whatever depth you have, right? That makes sense, right? If we made it on level 2 and hit apply, you can see that it moves up to level 2 and then goes down 12 inches for the depth, right? We could, if we need to offset that in some way, we can do that here. So, let's say I want to offset it at 1 foot, right? Now it's actually, the bottom of the slab is at the level because I moved it up 1 foot, right? Let's just turn that off. All right. So you can see that the properties tab becomes really important as you start to draw things because it's not just simply like with Rhino, you're just making shapes. Revit says, no, you're making a floor. What is the floor made out of? How deep is it? What are its properties, right? Same with walls, same with roofs and things like that, right? That's one of the things that makes it very helpful when you're really trying to put together an architectural project. It's maybe less helpful sometimes when you're just getting started and you don't know everything about, let's say, concrete floor systems and steel decking systems and how steel beams and columns work, etc., right? Or what kind of exterior thermal envelope you need and what that means. So, but it's going to ask you those things, right? Same thing when you make walls. So let's go to our first floor and let's start to make some more walls. I'm just going to go to wall architectural. I'm just stick with instead of generic 8-inch, I'll say generic 12-inch for right now. And I'm just going to draw a few walls. And you can see as I start to draw along here, right? That it's closing all of these corners up for me. It's snapping to the grid so I can use the grid as a center line for my walls if I want. What's interesting is you can draw these things in several ways, right? So location line, the line I drew, I could tell that that's the center line, or I could say that's the core center line if I'm using a specific type of wall where, let's say I have a CMU core, and then I have an air gap, and then I have something else on the outside and something else on the inside. I could say it's the finished face of the exterior, and then suddenly these things will move, or the finished face of the interior, right? And so let's see, let's just turn it back to wall center line. Right. So anyway, what you can do is you can begin to draw, but you can also specify, are you drawing the inside of the wall, the outside of the wall, or the center of the wall, right? Or the center of the core, wall core, whatever. All right. So just so you know that there's a granularity there. Sometimes if you accidentally toggle one of these things and you don't realize it, then suddenly it doesn't react the way you'd expect it to. But that's probably where first place I would look is its properties. Select the object, look at its properties, and see what's going on. You can see here that when I select this wall, and I can see this in three-dimensional view. It says that the base of the wall is going to be at level 1. So it's going to start at level 1 in elevation. And then the top constraint, it says it's not connected to a level. It's just going to be 20 feet tall. I could change that and say, let's move these up to level 3. Let's have them all move up to level 3, or maybe even level 4. Why not? I like to live dangerously sometimes. Haha. So yeah, let's just select these really quickly. Let's change them all together. Instead of being unconnected and just 20 feet tall, let's move them all up to level 4. You can see that they get quite tall. I'm having a hard time selecting things for some silly reason. The good craftsman never blames his crappy tools, like the mouse I'm using or anything. But let's see. I'm just sort of moving around, and I'll be honest with you, it's been a while since I've used Revit, so like I'm sort of still feeling out the like how I zoom in and out and how I use my mouse buttons. But so I sometimes I just revert to this and just turning something around, trying to find just the perfect view, so I don't have to worry about those things so much, right? All right. So again, I was just drawing walls willy-nilly, but you can see that all of these have the sort of parametric information built into them, right? And so I think that's really important to keep in mind. The idea that again, just like any other parametric modeler, you can reveal and sort of look at and then adjust those geometric parameters. And then the model sort of adjusts with it. So you don't have to sort of delete and remodel things so much. It's more of a game of here's what this thing's going to look like. And then as you start to resolve some of the ambiguities, get more information, start working with engineers, then you can start to sort of dial in with even more accurate. You'll have to start to adjust some of the things, and being able to adjust things at the parameter level is really helpful sometimes, right? Instead of having to sort of remodel everything from scratch all the time, which is what we had to do in the good old days when we just drew things before AutoCAD, right? So thankfully, we don't have to worry about any of that anymore. I don't think those were good old days. I think those were that was the hard way of doing things. All right. Okay, so you can see that I'm starting to build up a set of walls and maybe even a floor slab here or there. Um, and again, every time I go to my project browser down here, I can toggle back and forth between different plans and different elevations and different sections, right? Every time I've opened one of those, unless I close them, they remain open up here as tabs. So I can toggle back and forth between things and look at the section here, right? And see what I have. And again, right, I've told it that the walls are going to go from level 1 all the way up to level 4. So what happens when I move one of these levels? The walls are going to move with it, right? Um, which is good, right? So again, we built those associations in. Sometimes you give it just an explicit height, right? You say, I don't care what the other floors are doing. I want this wall to be this height. Other times you say, well, if we're going to start to adjust the floor to floor, we want the walls and the floor slabs to adjust with it, right? So it's just playing a game like that, right? The more you sort of get into this, the easier it becomes, but it's really kind of great to be able to uh, um, sorry, this is just bugging me. I drew these lines, these grid lines, but I'm going to go ahead and move them up higher so that they sort of go through the entire drawing so we can see them. And I'm going to make them stretch through it, right? I love having sort of grid mapped out, and then it almost feels like you're sort of making a set of design moves on a chessboard, so to say. All right. You can see, I even can see some of the Rhino model in the background that didn't adhere to any of this. It was probably close to 60 feet or so. Okay. And again, this is the same model each time. I'm just toggling back and forth between different views. Here's a level 2 plan, level 1 plan. The section, let's look at this perspective one more time, right? There's nothing really special about this perspective, but sometimes what I'll do is I'll set up a camera in a place and then I can always go back to look at this perspective and start to push and pull some things here or there or evaluate the work. Let's say it's very much about, first of all, this is turned to hidden line. So let's turn it to consistent colors. Yeah, let's save the project, sure, whatever, but come on now. We can turn the sun on, right? Let's see, let's turn the sun on. We can start to see shadows and where we have shadows being cast and things like that, right? So this is what I was talking about before, is you can begin to give yourself more properties. Let's make this more sort of closer to 16:9 widescreen, you know. I'm seeing an awful lot of the ground. I'm not seeing an awful lot above me. I would probably tilt my head up a little bit, right? And sort of really look at the frame of the perspective and see what I really have here, what I'm looking at. Oh yeah, look at that. All right, so that's getting better, right? I can start to change this stuff. It's really going to bug me if I cut off that corner in my perspective before I bring it into Photoshop and start putting in people and things like that, right? So anyway, you can start to see what we have here, right? And in perspective, that can be really helpful. There are ways to do walkthroughs and things like that, and we can play around with that later on. But again, I just wanted to sort of show you while we have these views up. If I go to the view pull down, you can start to create more three-dimensional views. You can start to do things like alternative axonometrics and also perspectives like this, where you can start to click and place a camera, point the camera where it's looking at, and then you can also adjust the frame here, sort of how much you can see at any given time, right? You can see again that this is a 2-point perspective and fairly wide angle. You can see it's kind of kind of distorted, right? So you can see that all the edges going this way converge to a vanishing point. Oh, sorry. Off into space over here. And then everything going this direction converges to a vanishing point somewhere over here, right? Including these, right? And this one. Okay. So always mindful of that, right? I mean, if you haven't drawn a 2-point perspective, boy, you haven't lived, but um, sorry, that's a lame, but uh, that's essentially the mechanics behind them, right? Um, establishing where this line is, where your two vanishing points are, and then projecting things out. The verticals remain vertical. There are things called 3-point perspectives. You're looking at something that's quite tall, looking up at it, then you can, let's say a skyscraper in Manhattan or something. Then it can look like also in Z, the skyscraper gets converges to a vanishing point as well. But for our purposes, right, we have a 2-point perspective here. All right, let's see. Close that out. All right. Now, it's not lost on me that I've been doing a lot of stuff and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense compared to what I had before. If I wanted to stick and try to sort of model more cleanly the sorts of things that I had with my Rhino model here that I brought in. And again, this is a reminder, I just imported this in from Rhino. The instructions for that are recorded the other day. I don't necessarily want to go through them in a lot of detail. Then, right, I didn't necessarily have a grid like I did in Revit. When I was modeling that original model in Rhino. Let's just make sure I'm selecting the wall. Oh, come on. There we go. Sorry, it's also making a bling every time I delete something. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but I hear it very loudly in my earphones. So sorry if it sounds like my cadence is off when I'm talking sometimes. It's because I'm reacting to sound effects that are just, disproportionately loud in my ears. What I would do is I'd look at this and say, okay, modularity in this case and repetition, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 modules. I have sort of A, B, right? I have a module and then a space, a module, module, space, open space, module, open space. So A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. And then on the B and the other parts and more depth, I do have these sort of vertical planes that can act as light scoops to sort of take south light and then bounce them down into the sort of northern parts of the building where it's getting deeper and further away from the south face, right? So if I'm thinking about what I was trying to accomplish and then also what I was reacting to, repetition and modularity, and then what some of the opportunities are when I was trying to place these things, I can start to say, okay, these can become light scoops, vertical baffles to sort of bounce light down into some of the deeper parts of the building. It looks like I have just a little bit of top light and side light here on the north and east side of these boxes. And then the south face, I'm going to have a lot of daylight and a lot of sunlight. And so maybe I need to start, first of all, I have these vertical structural pieces that also can become walls. Maybe they're bearing walls, or maybe they're just partitions with columns embedded inside. Well, we'll work that out later, right? And I'm just sort of thinking out loud, but there's a sort of cadence here along the street edge. But maybe I can put horizontal louvers or something along this at some point, or something to sort of control light, where I'm not just blocking light, but I'm saying bouncing light, right? So every time light strikes a surface and then bounces, right? Part of the light is converted to heat, and part of the light bounces off and becomes sort of indirect daylight, right? And so if we can do that on the outside of the building, bounce these things around, then we're not actually gaining a lot of heat on the inside of the building, right? But we can still take advantage of bouncing some of that daylight back into the building, okay? So it's about controlling light, screening light, separating light from heat. Oftentimes you do that by trying to bounce direct light from the outside into the inside, right? So horizontal louvers, shades, brise soleils, breeze block, all those sorts of strategies that you see throughout over centuries and millennia in the deserts and other hot environments. Those are there for a reason, right? Because they're trying to screen light from heat. Okay, so anyway, if I just sort of look at that and say, okay, boom, 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 I'm just sort of looking at these things, that's what kind of makes sense to me. And this is out of scale. Now I need to clean things up here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modules. Maybe I have A, B, A, B, A, B, and I have 3 modules, right? That would give me 1, 2, 3 sort of small gallery spaces, let's say, where I can, in each one, they could become dark, and then I use light to penetrate through at certain angles and certain ways for each one. Maybe there's a morning space and then an afternoon space, and then an evening space, right? Something over to the east, something in the middle, and then something on the west, right? Or something like that. I can begin to sort of take the opportunities and combine them or align them with the place, right? And then I can also turn on the shadows and start to change the time of the day, time of the year, and start to play around with things as I start to make further and further smaller decisions. But I want to make those big decisions in place, right? And so let's say, again, I have this module 2 deep, 6 long. And so I'm just going to roll with that and not think about this too much. All right, so let's say these are lifted up and they're taller. I'm going to first and foremost go to, let's say, either level 2 or level 3. I'm going to go up to level 3. Okay, so I'm going to go with the level 3 plan. Now it's not showing my grid. Uh-oh. And one of the reasons I believe is because I need to, for some reason, I made this. Let's see. It's not showing all the way down to level 1 and beyond. So with level 3 still selected, I can see the level 3 plan properties. View scale is at 1/8 inch at the moment. Display, so that's assuming that we're gonna create an 1/8 scale plan, floor plan. 1 inch equals 8 feet, or 1/8 inch equals 1 foot. Parts visibility, show original, detail level, display mode normal. I'll just leave all of this. Orientation, show hidden lines, color scheme location, visibility graphics override. Let's see what it's doing here. I'm gonna hit cancel. Graphic display options. Let's see what it does. Style hidden line, smooth lines. I'm just gonna leave that for a minute. I'm just gonna zoom down and see what kind of things I have here. Underlay, range, base level, and I'm gonna say, let's go all the way down to level 1. I wanna see everything from here all the way down to level 1. Range top level. That should be level 3. Not sure why that. Underlay orientation, look down. Maybe I have to hit apply. View template, view name. Not sure why it's not showing me my grid. That's dumb. It's showing up there in level 1 and in level 2. Color schemes, skin colors, display analysis, sunpath. Ay, ay, ay. View range. Let's see here. Bottom offset. View depth. Oh, maybe we have to do there unlimited. It's still not letting me see this. No clipping plane. That's weird. The bottom. Offset, view range, unlimited. Okay, sorry. All right, so when I did this, for whatever reason, I never had this actually happen to me before, but it's good that it happened to me because it might happen to you. And we're recording this. But when I made a level 3 and a level 4 in elevation with my levels, and it brought them in here, I go to them, and level 4, for instance, didn't actually show some of the grid lines. I don't know why. It makes no sense to me. So what I did is I went to, first of all, I'm looking at the level floor plan properties over in the box over here. And I'm going to say view range. And now I'm just going to say for the view depth, I'm going to say unlimited. For the bottom of the view, I'm going to say unlimited and hit apply and hit OK. Now I can see sort of all the way through, infinitely through the scene from the 4th floor on down. I don't understand why it wouldn't do that automatically anyway. I don't know if that's an anomaly for my system or if that would happen to everybody as you start to make more levels. So just wanted to make that abundantly clear what I did. All right. Okay, so it looks like first of all, I'm going to make a module and then an open space, a module, open space, module, open space. All right. And so I'm going to start thinking architecture, and I'm going to start thinking, let's make some floors. I'll start with floors this time instead of walls. Boundary line, and look at that. I can even sort of see how far away I am from these things. That's interesting. So let's say this is the extent of my property line. I'm going to go 8 feet out and then start creating a slab here. I'll close that up. And there's a floor slab. Now I'm just going to make several of the same. I could copy that. I think there's a copy here. I'm just picking each time, and then I don't know, I assume I just can hit escape when I'm done. There we go. Right. Now I have this, this, and this. Of course, I wasn't really careful. I didn't tell it. I didn't look at these and sort of make sure that I had 12-inch selected and that it starts on level 3. But before I started making copies of it, I probably should have done that, right? All right, now let's take even a closer look here. Let's start to make some walls. Again, I'm going to go to the architecture tab, wall, architectural wall. All right. This is saying generic 8-inch wall. Maybe I'll look for generic 6-inch. Let's try generic 6-inch. There we are. And then for the location line, let's say I'm going to say finish face interior, because I'm going to trace around the edge of this, and I want the wall to actually not sit on top of the slab, but extend beyond the slab and up and down in some way. Let's say for right now anyway. Okay, so you can see now as I draw, I'm drawing the inside of the face of the wall rather than the center line of the wall. All these things matter, especially when you're really trying to put together a project here. I'll hit cancel. I just sort of right-clicked and hit cancel. I'm gonna make another wall here. Repeat the last command, recent command. Repeat. No, that says wants to repeat the copy command. Oy. All right, so I'll just go to architecture, wall, architecture. Here we go. Finish face interior. So it remembered our constraint there, and it's kept it for us. That's nice. Hit escape when I'm done drawing those sets of walls. And zoom in over here and do the exact same thing. Wall, architectural. Oh, come on. There we go. Wall, architectural. 6-inch generic, finish face interior. For the edges, the lines that we're drawing, the paths. Hit escape when I'm done. All right. Now, a couple of things, right? Before I started drawing this wall, I didn't look at the top constraint, did I? So I said unconnected 20 feet. So that's 20 feet tall. Let's just take a look. Now, if I want them to be 20 feet tall, that's great. But if I want them to align with, say, level 4 or something like that, then that's not so great. And in fact, you'll see I have level 3, level 4. I never made a level 5, but we can actually go up 60 feet based on the parameters of the assignment. So I'm going to go back to section, right? This is just a quick reminder where we got these levels, right? When we are in section and plan, we can see grids and levels. In plan, you can only do grid, but in section and elevations, you can do levels and grid. So level, I can say, let's make a new level. And we'll start drawing it over here. We just start zoom in. And we know that this is going to be, we want this to be 12 feet more than level 4. And we'll just drag it over here so it lines up. It didn't work out for some reason. That should be 60. I must have clicked wrong. Again, I can go back here and just change that. There we are. Right? Okay, and if I need to drag these things around, I can. All right, so let's attach these now, these walls that we made to level 5. They'll be quite tall. 15, let's see, what is it? 15, 30 feet tall. Wow. Big walls, big tall spaces. But yeah, that could be kind of interesting. Let's see. So let's go back to our level 3 where we can see our walls again. I'm just going to select this one. I'm just going to say, okay, top constraint. Let's crank it up to level 5. Oh yeah, there we go. Let's do the same thing with this one. All right. Okay, so again, compared to, let's say, Rhino, where you just down and dirty start modeling things and model geometry, Revit becomes a little more of a going back and forth, the intellectual exercise of looking at the big overall ordering system grids, and then putting things in, the big things and then the detailed things. Um, but always trying to sort of make sure that you build the big things off of the grids that you align with, and then you build the small things off the big things that you already modeled, right? So so that everything's sort of interconnected. And as you make changes to one thing, all the changes propagate throughout, right? Without having to sort of remodel or fix a bunch of things. So you're good um, at sort of thinking that way, and it takes a little bit of time. But some of you are probably pretty good. You automatically think that way, and others don't. So it'll take a little bit of practice, I think. Now, here's an interesting thing, right? Our walls start at level 3, and our floor starts at level 3 and goes down a foot, right? So here's another thing you can do, right? Just as we can offset floors, we can offset the bottoms and the tops of walls. So let's say we wanted to actually, here you can see it, I think, if I move this around just a bit, see it a little more clearly here, right? So our walls are just sort of floating here, when in fact they would actually be anchored to the hung, let's say, to the floor, to the slab here. And they might even extend down to become sort of fascia, and then there might be a soffit under here somehow, depending on what we're trying to do. So let's select this wall while I have this in view. And if I look at this, I can say top constraint is level 5, the base constraint is level 3. But we can also do an offset. We can do a base offset, and we could say, let's do -2 feet down from level 3, right? So now it'll always be a foot down below. As we move level 3 around, the walls will update with it. And of course, I need to do that around all of these walls. So let me just do this. Just copy, Control C, and then I'll just select this wall, -2, boom. Same with this one. Select this wall, -2, right? And it's going around and trying to sort of visualize what you're doing when you're doing these parameters, right? Again, likewise, depending on how this thing is constructed, once we put a ceiling or sorry, a roof here, these walls might extend up as a parapet above the roof line, or they might just sort of look like they are just boxes and they just turn a corner and become roof. Depending on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish and how you would shed water and things like that and what they're made out of. So again, something to think about, right? So I made walls, I drew walls along the center line, or I made the slabs, and then I drew the insides of the walls to sort of wrap the slab with wall. And then to make it clear that the slab is wrapped with wall, I extended the wall down past the slab, and I would probably do the same up here for the roof if I was just going to use like a membrane roof. I'd want a parapet and some flashing, and then a flat roof isn't really totally flat. You'd probably bring it back to some scuppers or something in the side or something like that, right? So or a gutter or a drain, depending on how big the space is and if there's structure moving through it or not in the center. So anyway, long story short, right? I would do that with all of these. And now you can see that I'm just taking the start of this. First of all, I haven't added these openings yet, right? That's something else I would do, but I'm starting to make these modules by making them in a more disciplined way based off of some of the assumptions I'd made about the site and about the modules along the site, and doing it in a measured way now. I'm not starting with all these sort of funky shapes. And to me, it's a matter of trying to decide, well, which funky shapes I like actually these top cuts and side cuts, but I think they could actually change. Like for instance, a box on the east might be different than a box here and stuck between two of them in the middle versus one that really sort of faces west, right? So I might begin to sort of customize each of these. First of all, make the boxes and then start to make window openings and things like that into them later, okay? All right, we've gone over quite a bit in just short amount of time, and we've really only begun to scratch the surface, right? So this is going to be a multi-stage process, learning Revit. But the things that I showed, like higher level, do they make sense? I mean, there's some details here that, I had to like change some settings, but You know, is it sort of jiving overall how you like, you know, again, you have to put, I liken it to this. The metaphor is if you have a bunch of rocks and a bunch of gravel and a bunch of sand and you have to put them in a jar, you don't put the sand in first. You make the big decisions, put the big rocks in place, then the medium-sized gravel and aggregate, and then you put the small stuff in, and that's how you get it in the jar. If you try it the other way, you can't get it in, right? So that's the key thing here is thinking about a hierarchy of decision making, right? Establishing a grid as an ordering system, working with it rather than against it, placing in some basic modules, um, making sure that you sort of figure out circulation. In this case, I would have probably a couple places where I can go up and down, and it's pretty clear I have some lateral sort of circulation spine moving from east to west in my case. Doesn't have to be that way, right? But thinking about how do you do that? How do you begin to give order to things big ways, the big moves first? And then you can start to sort of say, oh, now that I have four walls and a roof, now how do I begin to articulate holes in this, right? And that's where the sun can actually come in handy, right? To sort of show you, you know, how you're casting, um, how you, let's say the room on the east is responding to the morning light, the morning sun, and how the room on the west is responding to afternoon sun or something like that, right? So again, there's a lot to sort of manage here, but that's what design is, right? It's about trying to, you have a lot of competing constraints and concerns, and you're trying to sort of figure them out, prioritize them, and then put them together in some sort of poetic and integrated way. So, and we haven't even, again, we haven't scratched the surface in the amount of stuff you have to take into consideration. But you got to start somewhere, right? So we're looking at form and space and just basic order, right? Grids, planes and boxes, and then the sort of space in between that you're defining. Okay. All right. I might just really quickly, since I've mentioned this, but I haven't shown this, is that there are roofs and they are separate from floors. And in fact, you can see here the icon wants to sort of show you an outline and then a basic hip roof. Your roofs don't have to be hip roofs. In fact, you know, they don't have to be sloped roofs. And so let me just quickly show you what this looks like when you go roof by footprint, roof by extrusion, roof by face, right? If you have something that you brought in from Rhino, it's like the sort of a face or a surface, and you want to just sort of, yeah, here it goes, right? Maybe it's even not even planar, right? Like that's something you can easily do in Rhino, of course. Then you can use roof by face, and you can select the thing, and then you can tell how deep it's going to be. You can do roof by extrusion. So you can sketch a profile and then extrude it in a particular direction. Or you can say roof by footprint. Let's try roof by footprint. You created the roof on the lowest level. Would you like to move it to, let's move it to level 5. And it should, again, it's giving me a boundary line. I should be able to, ta-da. Let's actually just go to level 5. Ah, I see. I can't really see it because level 5, 4 feet above level 5, there's nothing to actually cut through. All right. Really quickly, let's go to level 5 and let's say for the viewing, let's see, default system color scheme, range base, view range, edit, unlimited, bottom and level, view depth level, unlimited, unlimited. Now we'll be able to see everything. Okay. Right. You see there's multiple ways to draw this. I could draw a polyline, or I could draw like a click and then drag and go from one corner to alternating angles to make a rectangle. There's different ways to draw in Revit, just like you would in Rhino. But I like to go around and be very particular sometimes and anal retentive that way. And I'm going to hit the green check mark. Now let's see what god awful, terrible roof it gave me. Yeah, okay. So here, let me just show you. Right, it made a hip roof. Looks goofy, right? I mean, it looks like maybe something you put in like Louisville, Kentucky, not necessarily something you put in Las Vegas. Um, All right. So, but have no fear, right? We can say basic roof. generic 9 inches, right? So it's giving us a 9-inch thick roof. I'll just leave it at, I'll make it a little deeper, 12 inches. And let's see what we have here. Let's move up. Base level is level 5. Base offset from level, cutoff level, plumb cut, slope. All right. The slope is going to be 0. All right. Now suddenly we have a roof. Now what's interesting is that it went up from the roof, the sort of level 1 upwards, right? All right, base offset from level. So we can either move that, and I kind of want to do that. So I'm going to say offset level, I'm going to move it down -1 foot. There we go. And then from there, I could always offset the surface just a little bit off the level 5 if I want, for the walls. But there's our roof, and it's actually going to be, for whatever reason, they color code these things. They decided, at least on my system, to make the roofs green. Okay. Now, when you have a roof, there's ways of making holes in the roof, making shafts, walls, vertical holes in walls, wall openings, verticals. So again, when it comes to doing something like this, where I cut a slot in the roof, and then the slot looks like it wraps down and becomes the same sort of slot in the wall, here's what I would do. That I would start to think about a vertical opening. It would ask me to sort of draw the opening. Then I could do the same thing for the wall and draw the opening in the wall. Why don't I try that, since I'm still really quickly recording? I want to give you as many resources as I can while we're recording here for over the weekend, as you guys try things. And that's the question. That's the key thing, right? Try this out. Get stuck. When you get stuck, that means you're trying something new. You went beyond what you knew how to do, and you couldn't quite figure it out. And that becomes just the first question you ask on Tuesday, right? Remember, the mantra is fail early, fail often, right? We learn from that, and otherwise, I just assume everybody's doing really great, and I don't have to worry about it. All right, so we can see there's different ways of doing this. We could create a shaft, right? A vertical opening that spans multiple levels. Maybe it's to create an atrium, or maybe it's to try to demonstrate where we'd have a vertical chase to run some let's see, some systems through up and down. But let's just go vertical opening. All right, it should give us, again, let's see, probably needs to. Let's see. Let's see what I have here. Okay, it's telling me, I guess it's true. Parallel, maybe not. I don't know, this is weird. Now, why is it drawing it this way? Let's see. Let's just see what happens. The worst that could happen is it, crashes and my laptop starts like turning on fire. Yeah, sure. Okay, save the project. Right. So you can see I made it probably a pretty illy drawn hole. Um, what's interesting is you can always edit the sketch, right? You can come back and start to adjust things out if you need to, right? So you could either get rid of the hole, or you could start to adjust it rather than redrawing it. That's always an option. What are you doing here, Revit? You're drunk. Let's see. Ay, ay, ay. Let's see. 6 inches, 3. I don't know why it's not letting me just select the one point here. It's driving me crazy. All right. Well, at any rate, quitting cannot be undone. Are you sure you want to discard edits to open me? Yes. I'm going to discard the edits. Of course, if I just delete it, it goes away, right? So, you can have invisible geometry cutting holes through things that you can simply delete or draw, right? So let's try this one more time and see if I get something just a little better here. So one of the things I can do is I can go to plan view, and it's a lot easier to draw orthogonally there, right? So I'll say vertical opening. I'll cut it through that, I guess. 4 feet. It'll be 8 feet. 4 feet. And then back to here. Let's see if I get something a little cleaner now. And hit the check mark. Yeah, let's go back to three-dimensional view. Oh yeah, that's much cleaner. Much better. Now I can do the exact same thing also with the wall. So here I can say, let's make a wall opening. I'm just going to go ahead and zoom out, or sorry, zoom out here a little bit as well as zoom around. And let's make a wall opening. Let's select the wall. Come on now. Right. Now, I should say, you don't actually need an opening. You don't need to make an opening to then place a window into. When you place a window into a wall, the opening automatically happens with it's part of the window family. And why that's not going all the way up to the edge of past the wall? Let's see. Oh, okay, sorry. So here we go. Here's the wall. This should be 4 feet. I can always change that afterwards, depending on how close this is to where it needs to be. So let's say that looks pretty good, actually. I'm going to go ahead and hit that. You can see that there's this magical piece here. I could say this is supposed to be 4 feet over. And dang, it's not allowing me to change this part, but I guess I could always go over here and move it this way and line it up. There we go. Right, so now I have an opening there. So again, when it comes to just making things that aren't necessarily like your typical mundane architecture from the Suites catalog, it's not quite intuitive, but there are ways of doing this stuff, right? So it's just a matter of knowing where the tools are and trying to understand how walls and floors and roofs work together. How do you make holes in each and things like that, or you know. Okay. All right. Really quickly while I'm still recording, are there any quick questions? Because if not, what I would do is I'll stop recording. I'll leave, come right back, so that the video can get to processing, so I can upload it for you as soon as possible. But then you have a few minutes to work on things, and if you have any questions, let me know. Yeah. Any questions at the moment? All right. So I'm going to stop recording.